Is that because you know that Barney Quill bathed and changed and cooled off after he raped and beat hell out of this poor woman?
Your Honor, everybody in this court is being tried except Frederic Manion. I must protest...
Now listen, this is a cross-examination of a murder case. It's not a high school debate. What are you and Dancer trying to do, railroad this soldier into the clink?
Now, I'm not qualified to tell you what the greatest courtroom movie ever made is, but 1959's Anatomy of a Murder is probably my personal favourite. Or at least it's right up there, jostling with 12 Angry Men, which is more of a jury movie, really, Judgment at Nuremberg and To Kill a Mockingbird, and Liar Liar. Now, Anatomy of a Murder is one of those movies where there doesn't really seem to be a weak link anywhere on the screen. It's got a James Stewart performance that's pitch perfect, and director Otto Preminger's here operating at the height of his powers. There's an awesome soundtrack, etc., etc. We'll talk more about the other ingredients that make this one of American cinema's great works over the course of the next few minutes. Let's take a look. So shortly after Laura Manion, played by sizzling Lee Remick, is apparently sexually assaulted and beaten, her military officer husband, Ben Gazzara, grabs a gun and bursts into the local tavern, killing the offender. At this point, local lawyer Paul Biegler, played by James Stewart, decides to take the case on, and off we go. Now what follows is a court case movie where Stewart must defend the accused and attempt to convince the jury that the guy was temporarily insane at the time of the shooting, his morality clouded by the outrageous attack on his wife.
Okay, so I'm bored.
Am I getting warmer?
Well, I'll tell you that after I talk to your wife. In the meantime, see if you can remember just how crazy you were.
Now, the brilliance of Anatomy of a Murder is that all of this is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the assortment of obstacles that Stewart and co. must negotiate in order to win over the jury. One of these obstacles being the astonishing and dangerously flirty rape victim played by a young Lee Remick.
How were you dressed that night?
Oh, in a sweater like this and a skirt.
And the rest?
Underneath, I had on a slip and panties and a bra.
No girdle?
I don't need a girdle. Do you think I need a girdle?
I don't know. I don't know. How should I...
And the other being a cunning and brilliant George C. Scott as his courtroom opposition. Scott here quietly and efficiently delivering one of the great performances in film.
Oh, this was just the first time you were afraid of them.
No, I was always afraid of them.
Oh, this was just the first time you were enough afraid to allow a man to take you home from one of your evening prowls.
Objection. Use the word prowls meant to mislead the jury.
Now, even though this film's now 70 years old, I don't want to spoil that many details of it, but suffice to say, the movie is quite morally ambiguous. And as the story unfolds, we get quite a few questions thrown up, and not all of them really receive a satisfactory explanation. Although we do eventually know the outcome of the trial, there's never a great certainty as to what the truth of the situation actually was, which is one of the brilliant frustrations of the movie. You kind of have to draw your own conclusions a little bit, which is unusual for a film of the era, but something I'm a big fan of. Now, this isn't a short film. It seems like an entire movie's worth of plot unfolds before we get anywhere near a courtroom, but it's expertly handled, and there's not really a second or scene wasted, certainly in setting up everything we need to know, or think we need to know, before Stewart and Scott face off in front of the judge. Now, Anatomy of a Murder sees director Otto Preminger and writer Wendell Mayes pushing the envelope of censorship, for 1959 anyway, shocking audiences of the time by introducing such words as rape, panties, sperm and sexual climax into the vocabulary of the film. And to be honest, it's still quite jarring hearing James Stewart discussing penetration and the uncomfortable nature of Remick's alleged attack. I love how its frank language is addressed by the judge early on in the case to his courtroom and indirectly to us, the viewer.
The undergarment referred to in the testimony was, to be exact, Mrs. Manion's panties. There isn't anything comic about a pair of panties which figure in the violent death of one man and the possible incarceration of another.
And Stewart is, of course, outstanding throughout, privately struggling with trying to acquit a guy whose innocence is by no means definite.
He said, I got it made, Buster. He said, I fooled my lawyer, I fooled that head shrinker, I'm gonna fool that bunch of corncobs on the jury.
You're a liar! You're a lousy, stinking liar!
And as the audience, you're kind of right there with him. Ben Gazzara's Army Lieutenant Frederic Manion does come across as a very sly and shady character, but surely he's justified after his wife's rape. But his wife's flirtatious nature doesn't paint her in the best light either.
He may have slapped me because I was hysterical.
And didn't you swear to a lie to keep him from hitting you again?
No, I didn't. I did not.
Hadn't he already beaten you up at the gate when he caught you coming home from a trip down Lover's Lane with Barney Quill?
Objection! The witness has already testified she was beaten by Barney Quill. Quiet.
Now, just as good as James Stewart is here, George C. Scott glides in and upstages him during their scenes together. Scott plays the big city lawyer who drops in to help the seemingly inept local attorney prosecute the case. Now, Scott has a brilliant smugness and superiority to him. His calculated coolness is the very opposite of James Stewart's jittery, emotional, small-town lawyer.
Your Honor, a man's war record, in Lieutenant Manion's case, a great record, certainly shouldn't be used against him.
Your Honor, I'm as patriotic as the next man. But the simple truth is, war can condition a man to killing other men. I simply want to determine how conditioned the lieutenant may be to the use of firearms on other human beings.
Stewart's character here is a bachelor, and he seems to spend most of his time with his alcoholic business partner or playing jazz piano. Seeing him almost unravel beneath some of Lee Remick's frank flirtations are some of my favourite parts of the film.
It's the way you look at me.
Well, it'd be very difficult not to look at you.
Oh, the way I dress, you mean? You don't like it?
Oh, I love it. I just love it. Now, we'd better keep moving along with this thing.
Now, another favourite element of Anatomy of a Murder for me is its score from none other than jazz legend Duke Ellington. Now, not only did Ellington write the music solely for the film, he even cameos as the jazz musician Pig Eye in the local bar. So the 1960s would be a major decade for Hollywood. Bonnie and Clyde, Psycho, The Wild Bunch and The Graduate would break down barriers, but in films like Some Like It Hot, Touch of Evil and this one, the seeds were already being sown in the late 50s. Anatomy of a Murder was nominated for 7 Oscars, but didn't win a thing due to a little movie called Ben-Hur scooping up every award in sight that year. Now, I think courtroom dramas as a genre are sometimes a bit of a turn-off for people. By nature, there's not really much action, and many of them, I suppose, are a bit predictable. Now, I'm obviously not implying that all courtroom dramas are predictable, but it is a genre that can be seen as a bit stale, which is what makes Anatomy of a Murder, almost 3 hours long and now over 6 decades old, remember, such an achievement. You may know where it's going, but you may not agree with how it gets there. Go check it out.